need someone to talk to and you don't know what to do, call us 214-4400 when you're feeling all alone and they turn their back on you. Call us 214-4400. Call us 214-4400. Call us 214-4400. Call us.
You're listening to the Kind Counseling Podcast. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now back to the show. Welcome to the Kind Counseling Podcast. This is your host, Dania Roberts. I'm here with my man, Big Al. What's going on, sir?
Good.
Yeah. All right, man. You ready for this podcast?
Yeah, I'm ready. I got my bootleg Stanley. I ain't pay $100 for it, but yeah, I'm ready to go.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Listen, man, today we got a special guest with us, man, all the way from Jamaica. We're gonna introduce him shortly. But just to remind you guys, kind of counseling, like our hope is, our goal is to give hope to the hopeless. So today with this, we're just hoping that you guys will get a lot from the podcast. And we have a writer, an author, speaker, and a food security activist, Mr. Peter Ivey. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks
Happy
for
New
coming
Year.
on. Yeah, same to you, man. Same to you. All right, so Mr. Peter, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Just to jump right in there, just in terms of like your background, like where you from, that kind of stuff. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Cammy, that's always difficult, yeah? Because they say that Jamaicans have like 10 jobs, right? But we won't let jobs define us right here in this space. All right. So I'm mostly known as an entrepreneur. So yes, I'm a writer. Yes, I'm an author. And yes, I'm a speaker, but I think my passion really lies in entrepreneurship, right? I think that's where it all started for me. Just trying business after business after business until something clicked. And eventually, everything else just started to flow, right? All the other titles came after that. I was born and raised in Jamaica. I'm from the parish of St. Catherine and the city of Spanish Town. Lived in New York, moved to New York when I was 17 years old, right? Yeah. Now I kind of spend my time 50-50 between New York City and Jamaica, between business and speaking engagements and doing food security work. Okay. I'm a father, man. It's one of my most important roles, right? More than anything else, I take fatherhood seriously. Yeah. I would describe myself as passionate. I think that's the one word, right? Everything I do has passion inside of it, right? Because without that, it's a waste of time for me, right? Okay. Okay. I feel like I sit somewhere in the middle of having a lot of time to do stuff in this life and not having enough time to do stuff in this life. And so in that intersection for me must be passion to define your why. Like, why are you doing something? Why are you here? Why are you spending time with this person? Why are you doing this particular thing? My why is everything to me at all times.
Okay.
So
that's good. That's good. So you said you're born and raised in Jamaica. You came to America when you were 17, right? So yes. What was your life like in Jamaica, like that, in terms of that influenced you, like in terms of the person that you are today? Like what are some of the things that influenced you?
When I was growing up, yeah. And if you track the trajectory of my life, you'll see that Jamaica play a pivotal role in almost every single thing I do. And so the things I'm about to say, I wouldn't have known unless I look back to connect those dots, right? I was partially raised by my aunt, who was a teacher. She passed away a few years ago. So my aunt was a teacher and she was very pivotal in my life. She was my first teacher. She, everything I knew or I know confidence to be, she gave that to me, right? I was very close to my mother's side of the family. My grandmother have 9 daughters, no sons. And so I was raised by a bunch of women, right?
Okay.
And most of those daughters, my aunts, they mostly have daughters themselves. So my mother ended up with 2 sons.
Wow. Okay.
And so I'm raised in this family of women that come in all shapes and sizes and skin tones and different personalities. And so much of who I am as an entrepreneur, even the skills that are my strengths, actually came from that upbringing. Yeah, understanding what diversity looks like, understands why it's important to tap into all sides of your humanity, all sides of your masculine. Knowing how to build a team with different personalities. These are all things I learned as a youngster coming up in Jamaica. I went to you could say a prestigious high school, Jamaica College, right?
Okay. Okay.
And those years were very important for me. I stand on those years. So much of my educational background is at that high school, right? And so I attended that school from like age 12 to 17. And so much of who I am during those 5 years, the friends I made, discovering who I am as a man, how to interact with other men. This school is an all-boys school too, by the way, is where I learned so many of those things. My father was always in the picture, but he was on the periphery, yeah? And I idolized my father growing up.
Okay.
Like, idolized my father growing up. But at some point when I hit 12 and 13, I realized, but you didn't do much. Like, I idolized the wrong thing. Because Jamaican culture, you know, it's macho. You know, you don't realize how much your mother is doing. You're paying attention to your father. Your father have all these, you know, there's always kind of my father loved the streets. And as a young Jamaican child or boy, I gravitated towards that. And so much of the time that I spent with my father, I spent in the streets. Yeah, I actually spent in the street.
Just to be clear, when you say in the streets, what do you mean? Just to be clear.
Everything, man. Everything, man. Everything, man. I mean, everything.
All right.
So you got to realize, so my mother is, you could call her an academic, right? My mother is so this story, their love story is the traditional good girl, bad guy. Good girl, bad boy.
Right.
My mother is a studious academic, college educated.
Wow.
My father barely have education past a primary school level. Very handsome. Taxi driver, right? Like when he became like when he could choose work, legit work, he drove a taxi, he drove a car, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And so my father is a street person, is a street dude, and my mother is a school, studious, academic.
Right.
Yeah. And so went through high school. I had both these influences going on with me, Kami, right? I had my mother who would punish me by making me read books, right? And when I'm with my father on some weekends, whenever we could find him, I'm in the streets, yeah? And I'm doing everything and seeing and being exposed to everything. And so I existed in this like dichotomy, yeah? And then graduation hit. I graduated from high school at 16, going on 17, I graduated. And if you ask my mother, if you let my mother tell the story, she will say, well, I wasn't doing anything good, right? I had declined to go to any tertiary institution. I didn't want to go to college. I had already discovered the love of business and wanted to do that with my friends. I was selling CDs, I was selling T-shirts. We were running a sound system, playing music at different parties, and I was like, yo, making my own money, this is it. This is for me. And so from graduation, for a few months, I was doing that. But I also had an older brother who was very much also in the streets, yeah? And my mother was fearful that certain elements would take me over. Not that I'm not in school and I have this gap between. And one day she asked me if I wanted to go to New York to buy jeans. Yeah. And I was like, of course. Of course, I would love to go buy some jeans.
You to go buy jeans, you said?
He said buy jeans. Pack a full suitcase.
Yeah, that's literally the story. So I did not say goodbye to my friends. I had a little girlfriend at the time. I was like, see you soon. See you in 2 weeks.
Right.
My family, I was extremely close to my family. Nothing. I just like, I'm going to buy jeans. And that was it. And
buy jeans.
That's where I got on a plane.
Yeah.
I landed in February of 2000. I was wearing a t-shirt, a red leather Michael Jackson jacket, a Tommy Hilfiger blue jeans, and a white shell mount Adidas in the middle of winter, no socks. So that's
why do we do that though?
story.
Why do Caribbean people, we always come to the States in the middle of the winter time?
Yeah, we don't know no different, man. we don't know any different. So
your mom had you under the impression that you were coming here to literally buy jeans.
Literally.
All right. So what actually ended up happening?
What? Sorry, you said what? What ended up happening?
Yeah. When you got here, what's the story after that? Like what ended up happening?
So I was sent to stay with an aunt who I barely knew. So my mother had an older sister who lived in New York before I was born. Right. And so I barely knew this aunt, and unknown to me, arrangements were made and everything. And I came here still under the impression that I'm visiting for 2 weeks. And when that 2 weeks was almost up, I remember, like saying to my aunt and the people in the house, which were my cousins, because she had adult children who were older than me. So they were like my cousins. Yeah. So I remember saying, what's happening? 2 weeks is up. It's time to go. And I promise you guys, I'm going to be very frank, but I realized recently in where I'm at in my journey currently, I realized I have no choice but to face things that I've laid to rest in order to move forward. Yeah. So I was like, yo, my 2 weeks is up. It's time to go. And they were like, yo, call your mother. And so I called mommy and I'm like, mommy, what's going on? And my mother was very quiet, unusually quiet on the phone. And she's like, you're not coming back. And I said, what do you mean I'm not coming back? And she was like, well, I took a lot of things into consideration, and I'd rather you live away from me than lose your life or go to prison. And my aunt and other people in the house, they didn't deliver that news so well, yeah, because you guys will find out that it wasn't the perfect situation for me, yeah. And so they were like, you're not going home. This is it, right? Arrangements have been made. And that was it. I discovered that only a one-way ticket was purchased. And that was it. I was just supposed to, with the help of my new family, supposed to figure out the next moves. And what the next moves were, I ended up trying to figure them out on my own without their help.
Okay. All right. So you went from an environment where there was a lot of love, a lot of affection, a lot of support. Then you came up here to total strangers, and basically, and then you were told you had to stay here. What was that?
And you got to realize, so it's good that you said that, because remember I told you it's all women, and I was closer to my mother's side, so I grew up in the bosoms of women.
Okay.
When my mother's looking for me to whoop my butt, I had somebody's dress to go run underneath and hug somebody's leg. Right? I was spoiled by all my aunts. So I left, and my grandmother, oh gosh, we lost her in COVID. My grandmother and I were super, super close, and so I left what I would call my only family experience and environment to have never seen it again, Kami.
Wow.
To have never, to this day, to have never seen it again. And so what was your question about?
Yeah. I was just saying, like, what
sorry.
was that? What was that going from this supportive environment to one where you barely knew people and then you just had to adjust? Like, what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, that's a big
It
change.
was, yeah, man, it was rough because I was dealing with a couple of things at the same time. You know, when you graduate from school in Jamaica, like 16, 17, it's not the same as a 16, 17 here. You know, Jamaicans have to grow up fast.
Okay.
So I had some maturity, but it was a shock to move to New York and be with people who I didn't feel love me, care for me, or was supportive. And I remember thinking to myself, and I ended up being proven right later on. I ended up feeling at some point like it would appear that these people are doing my mom and me a favor. Mind you, a favor I never asked for. But it would appear that they're doing by housing me. And you could say take care of me because my mother, the arrangement was for her to send money from Jamaica to take care of me.
I was just gonna ask you that.
And at some point, that money started to dwindle. I was living with my aunt and collecting money from my mom every week or so via Western Union. And I watched that money I would collect dwindle from 200 US to my mother at one point sent me $5, $10.
Okay.
So she was staying from Jamaica. At that time, the Western Union fee was like $9.99. She was paying $9.99 to send me $5.
Wow.
And so much of what I was able to eat or to sustain myself, or clothes, or a winter jacket, or a pair of Timberland boots came from my cousins or from that aunt. And so there is this thing where I'm seeing that, okay, cool, I have a roof over my head, but I don't feel loved though. Okay. So what is laying underneath it? What's the real motive here? What's going on? You know, why did you offer to do this favor for my mother, but yet still I feel like this is a hostile situation for me?
Okay.
So I had to navigate that and then navigate this feeling of coming of age, but I'm like a child. Because here's what happened after 6 months. You know, your visa expires. So I'm now an illegal immigrant. After 6 months, I became an illegal immigrant. It was years later. My mother and I had a huge blowout. Where I asked, none of you guys realized I was going to be an illegal immigrant? That never even crossed your mind in 6 months? So that was happening. I'm feeling hostility and tension. I feel like a child because I have no money, and I'm just like, what do I do next? Yeah. And I felt alone. And it's not until this conversation that I'm now recognizing that this cocoon I locked myself into as an adult, like I'm a soul, like I'm a lone ranger.
I got you.
I didn't even realize that I had that feeling from that household until this conversation.
All right.
I thought that Lone Ranger feeling probably developed as I hit the streets. Yeah, but no. Sometimes those seeds are planted from before, I guess.
When you're young.
Yeah. So then, once I realized I was staying, the question of school became a thing because coming here at 17, I still had a year and a half left in high school in the US.
Okay.
Right. So I eventually started the mission of finding a school to go to.
All right.
On my own. Right. On my own. Yeah.
Now you mentioned before when we spoke that at one point you were homeless, right?
Yes, sir.
How did that come about?
So there are actually two phases of my life where I dealt with that.
Okay.
Right. And so I ended up leaving my aunt's house before I graduated high school, you know. Right?
Okay.
So shortly before graduation, things came to a head, and I just hit the streets. Right? And I felt like I could do that because at the time I was making friends who were they had support systems, but they chose to be in the streets, like in Brownsville and Bed-Stuy and places like that. Like it just seemed like we could hang out all night at various basements and things like that, right?
Flat bushes like that.
Flatbush. Yeah, man. That's where exactly. So I was in all of them places. And so I had left and technically without any set location, going to school, freshening up in school, you know, leaving school, going to another chick's house to go freshen up, that kind of thing, right? And so that was kind of a choice, right? Things came to a head in the household and I left. And I still had the refuge of school. So between certain hours, I'm at Robeson. I'm the first one there because I freshen up in the bathroom and I need to have breakfast. Okay. So I went to Paul Robeson High School. I don't know if you guys remember Paul Robeson. Yeah. And I ran track. And field.
Y'all always had a good track team, man.
Yeah, man. Robeson was a good track team. So I got to school early and I left school late. Yeah. And when I left school, I was living like a grown man, but without no, you know, I was just, yo, where you at? What's going on? Like, are you at 2 First? Are you on Lennox? I'm coming over and I'm there till 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm hanging out. I'm sleeping in somebody's chair, you know, going to school the next day. Wow. The next instance is a few years after that. And all of this is without papers, right? Being an illegal immigrant. So a few years after that, after I left high school, I ended up, you know, like working menial jobs. I ended up renting a room close to King's Plaza by Kings Highway and Utica. Okay. Lived over there for a while. Okay. And this is how I started to understand how sensible people end up. Because there are no drugs or no, you know, like, so you got to ask yourself, like, how do sensible people end up in situations like these? And I'm a young person. I got to be 21, 22 or so. Okay. I'm living around the corner, Kings Highway and Utica Avenue. New York Avenue, in that vicinity by Betty Israel. You remember where Betty Israel Medical Center was? Yeah, I rented a room over there.
I know exactly what you talk about.
Yep, I rented a room over there. And I had a job. And I had a job off the books, right? Well, it wasn't technically off the books. If you dig deeper into the story and connect the dots, I had connections that got me certain jobs, right? Yeah. Certain jobs and things, but I still did not have my documents, right? So I had a job and ended up being laid off, but couldn't be moved forward because how I got that job is because I didn't have the proper documents anyway. So I was just only supposed to remain with that job, right? With that position. So I ended up being laid off and I couldn't get another job. And so I ended up selling CDs on the corner of Kings Highway and Utica Avenue by the bus stop.
That was you, right? Man?
That was you?
I sold CDs there for a while. Yeah.
What was that, the B46?
Yeah.
Right. So if you remember now, it looks different, but back in the day, there were 2 gas stations across from each other. One was a rinky-dink gas station. It was a rinky-dink old-looking gas station. And so I spoke to that guy, and he allowed me to set up a table by the bus stop, but on his property. Right?
Oh, Manly? Oh, Manly?
Manly?
That's the guy's name, Manly?
I don't know the guy's name. The guy who ran that bus stop is a white guy. He was an old white guy.
Oh, okay. All right.
The guy who ran the gas station.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah. And so I paid him $50 a week. I went to 14th Street because I had a friend who was selling CDs on Church Avenue before. So he gave me his connect. I got CDs and DVDs in 14th Street. And I took those CDs back and I was selling CDs on the street corner. And I was able to like cover my rent for a while, but after a while, I just could not live off of it. And so that was my second time. I ended up just putting out all my furniture and just hitting the road.
So let me ask you about that, man. And Alan, you can jump in anytime you want to, right? What when you say homeless, you talking about you like living on the street?
Ride the trains, yes, sir.
So
ride the train, sleeping in the parks, yeah.
So we obviously being in New York, growing up in New York, like you see that, homelessness or people on the trains, like you take that for granted, right? Like you're not, sometimes you assume the person might be mentally ill or something like that. But then obviously the situation is like this. So what was that like for you? And you were like what, in your early 20s then, you said?
Early 20s, yep.
So you're on the sleeping on the train. What kind of things you encountered?
I encountered a lot of things, man. A lot of things. And then and then you definitely reach a point where you feel like things start to because you start to smell yourself. At some point, you're not showering as often as you used to. So then you know you're not an addict. Yeah. You know you're none of the stereotypical things that you would see or know people that if I'm sleeping on this number 2 train, right? You're thinking to yourself, like you're remembering the school you went to in Jamaica. You're remembering everything and thinking, there's no way this is not how it was supposed to turn out, right? I've seen all of the stereotypical drugs things that you would encounter. People shooting up. My first look at what crack was like I only knew crack from movie and TV and I never, like, you know what I mean? Like before that, I could only speak about crack from rap lyrics. Right? I could only speak about those things from rap lyrics. I would only see people like tie up their wrist from movies. I didn't even know if that shit was real because it's movie, right? So you have to open mind. But when you see it in real life, it's a whole different thing. Right? I saw those things. Yeah.
Do people do that on the train?
I saw that on the train.
Yeah.
New York City subway.
All right.
I mean, I'm from New York, so I know. I'm just saying.
New York City subway.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
So that 6 train is the worst, though.
Yeah, I mean, I never really rode the 6 train unless, I had friends in the Morrison Soundview areas of the Bronx, but yeah. I would frequent the 2 trains a lot. Because I felt comfortable with that train. It took me to Bronx, to the last stop where there were a lot of Jamaicans, and it took me to the last stop in Brooklyn where there were a lot of Jamaicans. And so I was familiar with both ends of the 2 train.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, all right. So how did you end up getting on your feet and, just getting your life together? Like, how did that whole thing progress?
I had a virgin from high school named Jason who would always look out for me. Yeah. And I wouldn't share much with Jason, but I think Jason had like an instinct or a 6th sense, right? And I also had a girlfriend from high school. We weren't together anymore. I used to see her when I was in high school. And one day, her stepfather saw me on the train under a blanket. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And he tapped me and said, like, yo, I know you. Weren't you Catherine's boyfriend a couple of years ago? And I was like, yeah, I remember you too. And he was in a position to help, right? He was the kind of work that he did. He was in a position to ask me questions and say, listen, this is as much I can do, right? I don't know where you can stay, but this is, my friend Jason offered me, he had a house in Canarsie, and he allowed me to stay in his basement while I was able to get work at a McDonald's. So that situation. So Catherine's father knew somebody who worked at the McDonald's and had enough pull to get me to do something in there, right?
Okay.
And I left from that to work the McDonald's, started working up some money, started saving up some money. I'm staying on Jason's floor in Canarsie. And then I just started saving, went from room to room to room. I started renting rooms. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, obviously, like when we introduced you, we talked about that seems like a long way from a food security activist. All right.
Yes.
So how do we connect those dots, like in terms of getting involved with that whole arena?
All right. So that's a good question. So to connect that, let's go back to where I say I'm renting rooms, right?
Right.
So I'm renting rooms and I'm paying attention to how the last few years of my life has been, right? Whereas like, how did I end up on the streets?
Right.
I'm so like I've been hearing that I'm smart all my life. How?
Right.
And then as I start to track the how, I started to look at ways to prevent that. Right? How do I never have to go through this again? And I think that is where the resentment from my parents and all the adults who came together to make a decision, I think that's where the resentment started to come in. Because as I start to think about, I start to trace all the steps that led to me. Right? Eventually, excuse me, as I'm settling in, renting one room, the price goes up, I got to move, I rent another room. And that whole system of being able to rent rooms, remember, by this time, I'm still only a few years into the country, so I don't really know how nothing works.
Right.
So renting rooms for $125 a week was a lifesaver for me.
Wow.
A lot of money.
The minute I discovered you could do that, if you're lucky enough to collect even a small paycheck.
Right.
Right? So I'm learning everything on my own in America. So I was like, okay, cool. I can rent a room. One room I'm renting a room and I'm sharing kitchen and bathroom with like 4 or 5 other people.
Wow.
Right? And so I'm doing that, going through the motions. I get a little laptop and thing, and I'm on the internet and I'm on MySpace and High Five and things like that.
This is a MySpace.
Yeah. I've always been entrepreneurial. I told you that when I was in Jamaica College, back home, I was starting businesses. So I knew that that was my love and my passion. I just couldn't believe how far I've gone or come from those things becoming a reality, And so I was always looking for things I could do. Most of them were like get rich quick schemes, but I don't know that. But it just seems like independent ways to figure it all out.
Right.
Online, I eventually met a woman that lived in Las Vegas, right?
Okay.
And I decided I was going to go to Vegas for a bit. Yeah. I'm getting to how this connects to food security, I promise.
I'm following you. I'm following.
You're like, Vegas, where's this going? So I met Omolas in Vegas. Online, right? In a Jamaican chat room. And we hit it off, we talked for a while. And then I'm like, yo, I'm going out to Vegas for a while. After all, I don't have anything in New York City, right? And so I pack my bags and I go out to Vegas and I end up liking it out there. But more importantly, she was a party person. So she took me out. She took me to places and things and I got to saw things. I got to see things out there. And one day she took me to a concert called Reggae in the Desert.
Okay.
And it was the very first time in my entire life that I was able to go to a reggae concert where I could see the mass consumption of my culture.
Okay.
Growing up in Jamaica, my father would take me to these hole-in-the-wall street dances. I never even knew how big Jamaican culture was globally.
All right.
And so being in Vegas, I'm at this concert and it's a massive concert and there's so many white people. And I started walking around and I see people selling Jamaican things and selling Jamaican food and they were not Jamaicans. So I said, so a light bulb went off in my head and I said, yo, me a Jamaican, I could do this, and I can cook.
All right.
And so I ended up thinking to myself like, wow, I have no idea people love Jamaican culture like this. What if I was supposed to package something and sell it? What would it look like?
Right.
And Kami, I think you're familiar with my first company, the Reggae Chefs, right?
I can't
And
remember.
I'll remind you, we're getting there.
All right.
So this seed was planted that
Right.
people of Jamaican culture, all these white people, you know, I think it should come from an authentic source. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
Right.
how can I package this thing? That seed was just there sitting with me until I told my girl that, look, I'm going to leave Vegas and go back to New York and see if I could get this thing going. Now, I'm extremely competitive, and I had developed this chip on my shoulder that I felt defeated by New York City. I felt like when I boarded a bus or anything and left the city, I felt like I was leaving with my tail between my legs. And so every chance I got, I wanted to come back because I wanted to like feel like you did not get the best of me. I came, I saw, and I conquered. Right? I don't know where it come from, but that developed in me. And so I came back to New York with the idea that I'm going to be doing something with that concept. I didn't have a name for it. I didn't have anything yet.
Okay.
But first I had to earn money. So I came back, started doing some little jobs, and I eventually, we're skipping a huge part where I became not an illegal immigrant anymore.
Okay.
So there's that gap we have to fill in.
All right.
So in my mid-20s, I was able to get my documents.
Gotcha.
Right? So when I came back from Vegas, I was able to go to an employment agency that gave me a job, legit job, in a hospital.
Okay.
Right? So we want to make sure that there's no gaps, right? We can connect them all. So as I'm doing the job for the hospital with the agency and stuff, I'm saving, right? And so I contacted my best friend who lives in Jamaica. He's a graphic artist and also my confidant and everything else. And I said to him, yo, look, I went to Vegas, I saw this and I have an idea. How could we get in on this action? And he said, what you want to do, start a restaurant? I said, no, there are too many Jamaican restaurants. I feel like I can cook. I feel like I love to talk about Jamaica. I feel like I know so much about Jamaica. Like, you think people would pay if we offered to come to their house and cook their favorite meal and talk about Jamaica? Do you think that's something that they would pay for? And he was like, nah, you're crazy.
You'd be surprised.
He was like, no, nobody's gonna do that. And so I ended up feeling like I didn't have any choice. Like, I have to try this. And I came up with the concept of a personal chef service. Mind you, I was not a trained chef. I was just someone who I could always cook.
All right.
But no, here I am seeing people cooking food who I know they can cook better than me. And, and I'm like, all right, so I came up with the concept of a personal chef service, but just not any personal chef service. One that you would invite to your home, that you could choose your favorite Jamaican meal, choose your favorite Jamaican activity, and the chef would come out, cook that meal, and teach you a little bit about Jamaican culture.
Did you learn how to cook from like your mom and your aunts and all of them? Like, how'd you pick that skill? Okay.
My mother was very big on putting me in the kitchen when I was young, by force, most of the time by force. So my mother was big on putting me in the kitchen. But when you look back on my story, I realized that I picked up so many things that was relevant to my success that I had no idea was going to be relevant. My aunt, the teacher, her husband was the head chef at Jamaica's police academy. That story had no relevance to me until when you look back, you go, if I'm living in the house, even though I don't have a memory of him taking me and putting me in the kitchen with him, my uncle.
Tasted it though.
I must have had experiences.
Right.
My father is a really good cook.
Okay.
My uncles on my father's side, really good cook.
Wow.
Yeah. And so although my mother was instrumental in putting me in the kitchen, there were cooking influences and food played a major role in my family as well. These women, listen, my aunts, All right, we're all food. It was all food at all times, and so I was able to cook and make my own meals no matter what situation I was in.
All right.
And I not only cook and make the own meals too, not alone, but I also had an understanding of, I loved history growing up. I loved history. I loved stories. And my father was a taxi driver. Remember I said that. So my father, unknown to him, what he eventually was doing for me that I didn't realize was by taking me on trips and drives and places. I was knowing Jamaica like a taxi driver as a kid.
Wow. Okay.
And so I ended up falling in love with my country, knowing places, intimate places about Jamaica, things I could speak to like I'm a historian, and I can cook. And so it was these little skills that I felt like, yo, I feel like people would pay for this. Right. And this concept was there, and we sat and we came up with the name, the Reggae Chefs.
Okay. Yeah? Okay. All right.
All right. And one of my friends was a cook in a Jamaican restaurant, and I went to him and I said, yo, look, would you cook with me on the weekends? You know, like I have this idea. I don't know if it's gonna work. Let me talk to your wife. Excuse me. Let me talk to your wife. Like, if I get a booking, I just want you to come and support me. I'll do the talking. Yeah, I will do the introduction. All I need you to do is cook. And so he agreed. And I made a promise. Yeah, I said to his wife, I said, look, I understand that you need him on the weekend, but I have this great idea. He's my friend. He's been my friend for a while. We're going to be in the newspaper in 6 months. I even said to him, I said, have you ever seen your name in the paper before? And he's like, no. I said, yo, we're going to be in the paper in 6 months. Guess what, guys? Shortly after, the New York Daily News printed an article on the Reggae Chefs.
Okay.
And it said, the Reggae Chefs brings Jamaica to your doorsteps. Everything but the beach.
All right.
So
I'm curious. So how did you market this idea? Because how did people even find out that you were doing this?
So, really great question, because I'm gonna fast forward a bit. Now, I speak so much on the startup process of entrepreneurship.
Right.
Because I've lived those stories. When I tell people that I never spent $1 on an advertising budget.
Wow.
And since the Reggae Chefs, I've started other companies.
Right.
And my trademark is that shoestring. How do you do maximum damage with this little funds? And so your question is perfect, because these are the things I speak about now, almost 20 years later, right?
All right.
My coworker at the hospital was my very first client. So she would watch me photocopy these logos and sit down and think about these things. And I would be like, what do you think about this? And I'm putting together these activities and entertainment. Because what the Reggae Chefs is, you could choose your menu, your dish from a menu, and then you choose your activity from a long list of activities. You could choose board games, language lessons, geography lesson. You could choose art and craft for the kids, right? And so in my work time, I was putting these things together. Okay. And she said to me one time, she said, you know what? I just remembered that my mom is turning 50, and we grew up in Harlem, but her grandfather was a Jamaican. And I've given her so much gifts. I feel like maybe this would be a unique gift to connect her with her culture.
Okay.
And so my friend Tiffany became our very first client in the projects, right? She lived in the Bronx in the projects, and she booked the Reggae Chefs to come out to cook rice and peas and oxtail, to play Ludi. You guys know Ludo? Ludi?
He would.
Yeah.
He's the music man, so yeah, he would.
All right. To play Ludi, to teach patois, to talk about Jamaica, right? That was our very first gig. Our second gig came from someone who attended that event.
That's how it goes.
Right?
Word of mouth.
And then by the time we were into our fourth one, a story came out in the Daily News, which just lifted us up from there.
Wow.
All right. So So the answer to your question is word of mouth, good service,
Right.
good communication and relationships with people, and those people will tell somebody about you, you know?
I'm sorry, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so as we rolling with that now,
Yeah.
I've now turned the corner. The story already right then and there is like, oh shoot.
Yeah.
I did it. You know, like I did something. I did it. This is legit. This is in the paper. This is, you know? And I decided to go get some culinary training. So I go to get culinary training, and it was at this training where I learned how the formal culinary field works and how it was exploding, and how the state of the culinary field is getting big, and how there are chefs who are becoming rock stars and things like that. And I also ended up attending an event at the United Nations, and it was where I learned about the state of hunger and the state of food insecurity. And I was able to connect that discovery with my own life and my own life experiences. And me being on the streets, and I had a brethren named Skunt from Trinidad who would pass food.
That's his name.
he would pass food in the back of a McDonald's, give me.
Oh wow.
You know? And so growing up in Jamaica, knowing what poverty looks like, and we weren't like poor, but we had bouts, you know, our situations that, and so it's like, I was like, oh shoot, this wasn't supposed to be like this, you know?
Right.
And make it worse, my experiences in America, I really understood what it felt like to be hungry, because I went to bed hungry many nights.
Wow.
And so doing training for culinary, learning at the United Nations that there's a hunger crisis, I realized that I had some skin in the fight.
All right.
You know, I realized that, yeah, I know what this feels like, and I really don't want children to have this feeling. I can't believe there are kids all over the world going to bed hungry at nighttime. And so I pledged that when I was finished with my training, I was then going to come up with an idea to give that would be my contribution to the fight against hunger and food insecurity, right? I'll stick a pin right here to share something with you guys. I've never had any doubts in my ability, because my aunt, since I was like 6 years old, gave me so much confidence that even at my lowest, I thought that this has to be temporary. I was never meant for this, right?
Wow.
And so I had full confidence that I had the ability to do whatever it is I put my mind to. So I finished up my training. I decided to start a project called Scattered Jamaica, where I'm searching places for similarities between Jamaican culture and other cultures. And as I'm doing this project, I'm learning about the way how other cultures eat versus how Jamaicans eat. And I stumbled upon a discovery that the world, people in different parts of the world eat differently. And those differences could possibly be one of the answers to how we can help to alleviate hunger, right? And so I came up with an idea called Mission Food Possible, or the MVP concept. MVP stands for Most Valuable Produce. And what the most valuable produce are is that I realized that as I'm traveling around, I realized that most of the world eat about 3 to 4 staple foods. Rice, corn, beans, right? Whereas in Jamaica, there's about a dozen staple foods that we consume every day. And so what would cause one part of the world to only limit themselves, that limit their diet this way, and another part of the world to have an expansive diet, right? They have this almost an innate cultural ingenuity towards food, right? And so my idea was, okay, cool, I'm going to start to list what are the most valuable crops and food that we have in our culture and how it can help to alleviate hunger, starting with the Caribbean first, where these foods can grow plentiful. And that led to what I call the MVP scoring guide, which allows you to measure how important a crop is. And I came up with that in 2015, 2016, and in 2017, we tested the theory in Jamaica, where we said, let's go to this place. Let's see if we can use our tool to identify what are the most important crops in this community. And then we took chefs like myself to the community to train people in the community how to cook creative meals with these crops. So it was about identifying first and then utilizing, right?
Okay.
And by the time we were done with that, Forbes magazine said that we might have the answer to the world's hunger crisis using that concept.
Do you think it's not, I mean, I think my outlook on that though is, don't you think it's more of an economical crisis than actual food production or food consumption?
No, I think food security is a complex issue, right? And if you look at what the United Nations says are the Sustainable Development Goals, you got poverty, that's number one. So poverty speaks to what you're saying, right?
Right.
You have no money. The number two issue is hunger, right? And so if you just look at it for surface value, you go, okay, cool, if I don't have money, then I can't eat.
Right.
But in plenty places, namely the Caribbean, you don't have to have money because food grows everywhere.
Right.
The right type of food as well. Food that is linked to who we are as a people, our cultural and culinary identity steer. And let me tell you, I pointed to several things about why we cannot stay, especially when you go from region to region, where it's not an economic issue. When there is a hunger problem or shortage of food, you've never seen a Rastafarian on your TV screen. Right?
Wait. That's a joke, or are you serious?
No, serious.
Explain what you mean.
Let me tell you why. Because one of Jamaica's one cuisine that have come out of Jamaica is the Ital cuisine. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah, I know about Ital.
Right. The Ital cuisine. The Ital cuisine is strictly what you can grow. And so the Rastafarian literally can look out at a landscape at the countryside and see his or her food. Right? And so
what happens, I guess my question is, but what happens when you have big corporations that move those areas that you're planting and growing out of the way? Again, it's to me, it switches back to becoming an economic thing, because if you don't have the money to get what you need or the land to grow what you need to grow, you're still stuck in a position where you can't feed yourself, right?
I love your question, but that's not happening. Remember, food security takes on a different face in different regions, right? And so that's not happening in Jamaica just yet. That's happening in other parts of the world, like Mexico.
Well, that's why I guess my question is coming from other parts of the world. This is happening,
man,
where people don't have the land to grow their own food.
Exactly. So if you look at places like Mexico, the fight against food insecurity takes on a different. So if you look at activism, food security activism, my work focuses on the Caribbean and Africa, because grounded in my work is, as a chef, I'm focused on what you can cook, what you can create at a low cost, what's available to you. The same activist can have the same approach in places like Mexico, where they are literally plowing away the land to plant a monocrop like avocado.
Right. So I guess that's where my question is from, is from that outlook on where I've seen reports of this happening in certain parts of the world, maybe not affecting the Caribbean and certain African countries at the moment.
Exactly. And so to your point as well, somebody else might say to me, well, what about the use of GMOs? Well, I could see why GMOs will be important to certain parts of Africa, but don't bring that shit to the Caribbean just yet.
So just for our audience, what's GMOs? If you could just explain what that is to our audience.
So it's genetically modified organisms,
Okay.
right? Is where you can manipulate seeds to grow a certain crop, or to grow at a certain climate, or to grow at a certain temperature, or to grow in a certain soil, or to have certain favorable features that you want that crop to have. Now, if you look at where famine is happening in East Africa, right? It's a very arid desert place. Not a lot of things can grow. So that's contributing to food insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
So people can say, well, we've developed this new type of sweet potato that can grow in the desert. This is an example where the idea is normally you need X amount of moisture to grow this crop. We're going to genetically modify this crop to grow in this particular place, right? And so different solutions are applicable in different parts of the world, right? And so I'm not a scientist. I'm not from academia. I'm purely a Jamaican chef who's looked at places similar to Jamaica and say, yo, we can't bring the GMO shit here just yet when we're not fully utilizing the
stuff that's growing there.
The stuff that's growing, exactly.
Gotcha.
I was going to ask you, how much of a political issue is this? Because I'm sure, like Alan is saying, big corporations get involved with this.
It's a very political issue. It's a very political issue, and I'll show you the different angles. And so you say, all right, if you look at a place like the tropics, where food is actually plentiful, and they want you to believe that food is short. And why they want you to believe that food is short is because huge people from overseas are getting huge contracts to import food into a country where food is already plentiful.
Wow.
And so our own agricultural sector is not being supported because the government can make more money from foreign contracts importing food. So for example, Jamaica grow carrot. Why do we need foreign carrot? Why do we need carrot from another country? Right? Why do we need, right? So yes, from that perspective, it's a political issue. It's also a political issue from education standpoint, right? We tend to skip steps as we provide solutions to social problems a lot, right? We skip steps that include the input from the people who are struggling the most a lot, right? And we also skip steps like the low-hanging fruit in social issues is education and training. We can't fix the people's problems. The people don't even know they have a problem.
That's true too. Yeah.
Right. So
that's a part of your mission, like the
definitely.
Okay.
Definitely a part of my mission. I've been doing it now for almost a decade. I've grown so much into it. One could argue, well, not argue. I think it would be easy to state that I'm probably Jamaica's leading food security activist, with my organization being one of the leading being the leading grassroots food security organization. And I think the reason why we've been able to sustain Cami is because, one, I've been a bit naive in my fight against hunger and food insecurity. Naive in that I never even knew that nonprofits, like, there's money in it. I never even knew that there's money in charity work. Like, I never understood that you could get in that line of work and your goal is to make money. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, that's
and
tricky.
so what I mean,
yeah,
you know, it's tricky, but listen, I'm here to talk it. That's what I do, right? So let me tell you what I mean by that. Is because I've known what hunger pains feel like, and because I'm true to the mission that I want to help to eradicate this thing, I haven't aligned myself with any political elements. So we're in the middle, right? We're in the middle. We have no alignment, right? No, I say naive because the funding and the support of the government elements usually are good for entities like ours. But then somebody gets to tell us where to go, what to do, and how to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't want that.
Yeah.
Right? So much of my work, and I've been able to speak freely because we are not aligned in any way, shape, or form with entities that can dictate to me and my team about how to do our work. Yeah.
All right. So you get funding from, I'm assuming you get funding from all over the world, not just Jamaica, obviously, right?
Well, our two biggest source of funding is friends of the work who support us and donate to our cause every year, and my own companies, right? So I have the Reggae Chefs, I have P3 Culinary Kit, who are, and so my companies are two of the biggest sponsors of the food security work. I also, we write children's books. All sales from children's books goes towards fighting hunger and food insecurity. We have a very popular t-shirt line called Food Securities, and all sales from food securities go towards fighting hunger and food insecurity.
So if one of our listeners, let's say they were moved by your message and they wanted to contribute or give to the cause, like how would they reach you, contact you, how would they give to the cause?
Yeah, man. Missionfoodpossible.com. That's our website. You can reach out to us there. Our Instagram handles are mission_food_possible. My Instagram handle is Peter Ivey Official. Right. And yeah, I mean, someone should be able to connect with us to any of those channels.
All right.
So what have you found it? Have you gotten any roadblocks from like maybe government entities trying to stop you from doing some of that work? I'm just curious because I would assume major corporations are looking like we don't really want you to, be doing this because you're cutting money out of our pocket.
So it's a very good question. The answer is yes, but not as explicit as you would imagine it to be, right? And so, for example, let's say we have an event, we might not get as much coverage from the press as we deserve for doing that type of work, right? And you've got to realize too that so the smaller the country is, the more controlled everything is, right? And so we felt the pinch there. We've also felt what you call it, like where people have said, well, we won't support them because this person. So let's go back to the political stance and how it runs in Jamaica. If we get someone to speak, Jamaica is a place like Jamaica is heavily influenced by politics. And we have two major political parties. And so if this year we have an event and someone from one particular party decides that, yo, listen, you guys are in my territory, in my region, I would love to come out and speak to my people about the importance of projects like these, right? We will allow them to do that. But then what happens is the other party will say, oh, so you guys are aligned there, so you can never ask us for any support. Right? And so that has happened throughout the years. That does not deter me though, because the alternative is much, much scarier. The alternative of being controlled about who to help and who to support is much scarier than people cutting off our lifeline, because you cannot cut off our lifeline. Right? It's virtually impossible to cut off the work that we do. And I say that, and what I mean by that is I started this work with the thinking that if I'm able to help one person, the work is done. And so you cannot stop me from helping one person. Even if you took our organization and threw it out, my ancestors taught me that my power is actually right here. And so there's no way to actually, short of taking my life, there's nothing stopping me from speaking to one person in a community, and that one person had come from a family of 10, which means the knowledge that we're giving exists here. And if I can pass it on to you. And so it is that thinking that they've now realized. And let me make sure that we're clear. Because we've had that revolutionary thinking from the jump, we're in very good standing with our people as I'm talking to you now. So we're not in any, we don't have any, as a matter of fact, we might be the only organization of this nature that can pick up the phone and call all three ministries, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Ministry of Health. And they will know we're credible because we've withstood and stand the test of time by showing that you cannot corrupt us, and we're not aligned with anybody, and we cannot be controlled. And eventually, people respect you for that. Yeah.
So your take, I guess my question that after reading your bio, I was curious about is, so what's your take on actual, this creation of, like you said, GMO products and fake meat and all those type of products you see keep getting pushed out? Do you think that can help for world hunger, or do you think that's hurt, or do you think that it's under an umbrella that is just kind of false?
It's a very good question.
Because that's how they try to market it, that this stuff can.
Fake meat.
Yeah, well, fake meat and fake everything. I mean, some of the strawberries are fake. I mean, broccoli is fake.
Right.
So I guess my question is, the way it's being marketed to the public is, hey, this stuff can stop world hunger. This can, we don't have to worry about planting anything or worry about raising cattle, and we can just make it in a lab, and here's meat and here's vegetables. And
right. So let me answer that. So no, if you listen to them, you will get pulled into the web of deceit that makes you think that the problem is bigger than it is. The problem is unsolvable unless these people put on their lab coats, show their genius, and create new things for us to consume. My work have actually taught me the very opposite. And let's start here. The people who are truly wealthy in this world, just a fraction of their income or wealth can eradicate the problem. I want you to put that into perspective, yeah? The people that are wealthy, forget even wealthy, a couple of rich people put together can eradicate the issue of hunger and food insecurity. It's another conversation as to why that can't happen, right? And so if you look at just the basic, and I'm going to get to some other things, but if you look at just that, a few kind-hearted people, okay, let's look at this. We know that Bill Gates and them and Oprah and all of them have pledged and told us about their philanthropic activities.
Well, these are the people that invest in these companies. So
now you get to the second part of the conversation.
Okay.
So now we get to the second part of the conversation.
Right.
The second part of the conversation is that we actually know why this can't happen. Is because capitalism has caused us to lose our humanity.
Right.
It's gone. Right? And so I cannot agree with that approach. If you let them tell it though, it's because a lot of us don't travel and a lot of our people don't have a truly global perspective. We swallow everything they tell us. But the minute you get out there, you realize that, oh, this don't even make sense. But they make it seem that this is the next wave. This is important. That is why you have to do it. But meanwhile, when you check it out, when you check out who their sponsors are people making money from it. You understand? And so no, I actually believe that we can sustain ourselves without the lab-grown foods. But what do I know, man? Like, if you can create the need for something, which is what capitalism is. If you can create the need for something, create the demand, and then provide it, and then the supply, then you've hit the jackpot. And what's more diabolical than to create that demand out of something that is as incredulous as hunger?
This sounds like a deeper issue, man. which I'm not
that's
sure.
Why I asked if it was an economic issue globally than it is. Because I mean, I've been to a lot of countries too in my travels in the military, and from what I've seen, it seems more of an economical thing than anything else. I mean, you have countries where people are starving, but they don't even have access to the resources that's coming out of the country. So I just find that interesting.
I see, before I can get to certain places, man, even when you get to Africa and you realize how the European powers are holding some of the African countries by the throat. I can't agree that's an economic issue when I can see the hand around the throat of the country. Right?
Well, that's what I mean by it being an economic issue. Is the power, the people that are controlling the money are starving other people. That's what I mean by it being economical.
All right, we're on the same page, because that country cannot do anything about their economic status.
Right, because that's being controlled. Right? So their food is now being controlled because their economic is being controlled.
That's correct. That's correct. So we definitely have countries like that that are doomed. Wars are being created that are cutting off food supply. But as I said, food security is a complex issue. My work is just beginning, I think. I'm now stumbling on things that are going to be controversial. And I've just now started to talk about them. But as we look at the issue, it's like you're learning why our people are hungry. And one of the things I'm starting to talk about now is I don't think my people has ever been food secure. Ever. And so here I am as a naive individual a couple of years ago who's saying, I'm fighting. And I've come up with this solution that Forbes magazine has printed. And as someone, I'm thinking this is a way to go. And then as you grow into this thing, you realize that all of your data and information that you know has come from organizations run by people who don't look like us. All of the data and the studies and the research come from people who don't look like us. And so when you look back on all the effects of the transatlantic slave trade, no one can point to me a time when, since the transatlantic slave trade, that we were ever food secure. I'm talking about people of African descent. There was never a time. And food insecurity and hunger hides in the dark because racism is positioned as a bigger issue. Discrimination positioned as a bigger issue. But where you have racism, discrimination, and prejudice, food insecurity is right there. It's never far behind. And so there's actually never been a time when our people have been food insecure. I mean, food secure. We've always been cut out from the food that's important to our cultural identity and our culinary identity. Identity being the key word. And so if we accept, and you hear it all the time, people of African descent are having identity issues, but we don't break down what identity issues. One of those identity issues that we're also having is culinary identity. And that is a huge part of food security, especially for people of African descent. And it's affecting the economy in ways that we can't even imagine. So for example, Black farmers in Central and South America are having a hard time passing down their farmland to their kids. They don't want it.
Oh, wow.
They don't want nothing to do with it.
Well, that's not just Central and South America. I was watching a report.
No. Yeah, of course.
The South too.
Yeah, of course.
People don't want to be farmers. They want to go do admin work. Right. So a lot of people end up just selling off their farms to the bigger corporations to take them over.
Right. And if you sell off your farm to the bigger, if you sell off your black-owned farm to that's been in your family for generations, they're going to start a monoculture on that farm and plant one cash crop. And if you're planting one cash crop, you are contributing to disruption in our food system, and you're contributing to food insecurity for my people. Yeah.
Well, you definitely seem really passionate about this, man. I mean, like considering how many even just businesses you started around this. You know what I mean? Yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, Cami, without even knowing, I'm glad you said it. Every single thing I've started since then have something to do with food insecurity. My latest venture is P3 Culinary Kit. And what we've done with, what P3 does is we partner with culinary schools to supply culinary uniforms and utensils to their programs. But that really is P3 Culinary Kit came about when somebody asked me a question like, well, how do you get other chefs involved in the fight against food insecurity? And my answer quietly to myself was, well, we're going to have to try to get the attention of chefs when they're still in school, so that they are learning about their social responsibility and purpose before, so they can come out into the world already ready and aware of these issues. And so what my company does is, for every school that we supply uniform and supplies to, those students get access to social responsibility training, access to work with Mission Food Possible, networking with social-minded chefs, access to their own exclusive social responsibility and culinary newsletter, right? And so our students that purchase P3 Culinary Kits are becoming knowledgeable about what their social purpose is versus stumbling upon it, if ever, once they graduate from school. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Peter Ivey, man, listen, you've definitely dropped a lot of gems on here, man. And you know, shared your story and given us a lot of insights, man, which I definitely didn't know about a lot of the stuff you're talking about. So thank you for sharing that stuff, man.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, you gave out your information earlier. Anything else you want to add before we sign off? Anything else you want to add?
I think, because I know you guys do great work in the community in regards to mental health, I think I would definitely like to add people of African descent, everybody, right? Everybody. But I speak passionately about my people, Cami. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Our mental health is very important, and we don't want to take it for granted, because it might be the very same thing that hinders our progression, our progressive movement.
Right.
And it might expose the gaps or the disruptions or the unhealthy pieces or the questions, right? Whatever terminology we use, I'm not a professional here, Cammy, you are. that can surprise you when you least expect it and derail you. And so whatever it is that we need to do, whatever step that we need to take, whether it be for myself, it's admitting first and foremost to myself that this exists. I can choose when to deal with it, but at least I know it exists. But I know now more than ever that my mental health is very important and vital to every piece of success or every piece of work that I'm trying to accomplish.
Amen to that.
And so we shouldn't ignore that at all.
All right, sir. Listen, man. I see you like every 5 years, man. It's always a blessing to see you, man.
Yeah, man, of course. Always a pleasure, Cammy. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for dropping in, man. We appreciate you, man. And continue the great work you're doing in Jamaica and around the world, man. We appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
Of
I enjoy
course,
that
thank you.
combo too, man. Thanks for some of that insight. I appreciate that too about the food, man. I really do.
Thank you. I appreciate your questions, guys. Love it.
All right. Peter, we'll talk.
All right, no problem, man. All right. Okay.
If I ever took a loss, I learned a lesson. I won't ever think I'm better than the next man. I've been down before to come up, I ain't stressing. Baby, I'm too busy counting.